Morning, students. So last class I discussed about inline member functions. So uh, where from inline member functions we saw that inline member functions are inserted directly into the program. That means in inline member functions we learned that the statement of the inline member function body got directly copied to the calling part of the program. So this calling program, this line statement was replaced by this. So that was to prevent overhead, right? So in terms of arguments or stack overflows like that, which you'll be regarding stacks, you'll be learning in the data structure chapters. So you'll understand from there. Now, so today I'll start with this object as function arguments. Okay, so you can take your textbook and check from there. Okay, so what is object as function arguments? Okay, now we have seen arrays of class object. We have seen a class of array, but since the beginning of the program we have seen that all the most of the class data members were declared as class of array, or by the data members or the variables were declared as array names. So again we saw that array of class objects, we saw that the object can also be declared as an array. So here we saw that this object emb was declared as an array name, uh, so that uh, uh, so that multiple employee data could be entered, or in the case of this, uh, the to access the global variable data that was 10, that was assigned to max. So this value 10 was assigned to max. So what happened was that it could declare 10 employees data, so 10 different employees like that. So you saw that the advantage of using arrays of class object was we can declare as many objects using the same class name like that. So many employees data could be declared or could be entered. Then again inline member functions, and then today topics is object as function arguments. So you can see that object can also be used as function arguments. So what does it mean? Which means that objects can be used to pass the arguments through the member functions. Okay, objects can be used to pass the arguments through the member functions. So uh, in the from the beginning of the program we have seen that objects, after the classes declare the objects were used to initialize the data members, right? Like emb code equals to 100 like that. So when the data members were made private, then using the member functions like emb input data, then uh, using the public member functions, the objects could assign the values to the, or the member functions could directly access the private data members and assign the value, right? Now in the case of this particular objects as function argument, here again we are seeing that the data members are private. So how is it possible for the object to pass the arguments? Okay, so there are two ways. Okay, so so far as the objects as function arguments concerned, okay, the member functions of their function arguments, the object can handle both the ways as pass by value and pass by reference method. So we have already discussed this pass by value and pass by reference method in class 11 function chapter, if you remember. Okay, pass by value, a copy of the value is passed to the from the calling function to the call function, right? And in the case of pass by reference, what we did, not the value but the address, right? The address of the variable was passed from the calling function to the call function, so that was passed by reference. Okay, and if you remember array chapter, okay, an array is always passed by reference, so pass by reference method is used in an array. Okay, so C++ provides two methods for passing variables between function objects. Okay, for passing variables between function objects, calling function to call function. So this is pass by value, pass by reference. So first we'll be seeing the pass by value or by copy method. Okay, so the phrase pass by value means the same thing in computer terms. In passing by value, the actual variable is not passed, but the value of the variable is passed to the receiving function. Okay, so in pass by value, see, the actual variable is not passed, the variable is not passed, right? But the value of the variable is passed to the receiving function, so a copied value. Okay, now so like the previous example, the employee class has a public member function input data which inputs the data for the private data members, but on the same way the data can be sent to the function by a pass by value method to the input data function. Okay, so in this case, see, the employee class has a public member function input data. We have already seen this input data in all the classes and object program, all the previous programs, and the main purpose of this input data function was what? To enter the data, right? To enter the data from the user side, uh, so through the C input stream or using the gets function, right? But now the purpose of this here will be using this input data function, member function, in a different way. Okay, so see, inputs the data for the private data members, but on the same way the data can be sent to the function by a pass by value method to the input. So using the pass by value method, okay, the values will be passed to the input data member function. Okay, so in every program there's a slight modification, okay, slight changes. Okay, so you have to use all of this like that. Okay, so some slight modifications, some slight improvements in all the programs. Clear? So easy to remember as you're going through program by program, topic by topic. Okay, but all in one, you might forget. So regular practice is necessary to understand each topic. Okay, now in this in this particular example, if you see that in the here in the within the main function body, okay, here you have declared an object, okay, by the class employee, and see how do you see what you are doing here is the member using the member functions. Okay, this values 100 separate by commas, Miss Suchata, PGD computers, 12,500. These values, okay, that belongs to the object are passed through the member function. That means this is what? This is actually initialization. Okay, this is actually initialization. So assigning the values to the variable, which is actually if you consider it, it would be same like, okay, emb, it would be like the first programs that we have seen, emb code equals to 100, right? Okay, like that. So string copy, and then we copied this Miss Sujata, string copy, we copied this PGD computers, or emb dot salary equals to 12,500, right? So same like that. So what happened was that in the case of that, the data members were public, so the object was directly able to access the data members and assign the values. Okay, but in the case of this particular program, the data members are private, so the object is not able to access the data members to assign these values. So we have seen in the previous programs that To since the data members are made private, how can the object assign the values? By using the member functions, right? But in the previous program, if we have seen that the member functions did not pass these arguments or initialize these arguments directly like this, right? Instead, using the scope resolution operator, the data values was entered one at a time using this cout cin uh, statements, right? Okay, so but here what you're doing is that directly, okay, by the member functions, okay, using the member functions, the object is passing the arguments. So object as function arguments, okay. So using its own member function, the public member function, the object is passing the arguments. So this is the actual argument, okay. So this is same if you remember, there is no confusion in this part, okay. If you remember that in your class 11, the average of three input values where you pass the values m1 comma m2 comma m3, right? So same like that, okay. So now coming back to the program. So as usual, the program always starts with header file. The class name is same, employee, okay, user defined data type. So here the data members are addressed as through the private access specifier. So here we have employee code, which is of integer data type. We have the employee name, okay, which is actually an array name, right? Okay, so the employee name, it can be maximum up to 20 characters long, okay. So we have employee designation, employee salary, and then hra and da, so house rent allowance and journals allowance. Along with that, we have the public member functions, okay. So the public member functions is such that here these are the normal functions that you have already seen. Void display. So the first one was okay, this is your input data, okay, this is your input data. So this is a new one, which like the sample that you have already seen, right? If you saw in here, these are the arguments, but if you see here, if you see in this is not the argument, this is the parameter, or this is the variable, right? So in this case, this is actually what, this is your function prototype, so your function declaration. So it signifies the return type, the function name, the parameter type, the parameter name. So as a sample to tell the compiler that this function is going to be used, and it is going to pass this parameter type, and it is going to accept this parameter type, okay. So we have four parameters, 1 2 3 4, okay. Employee code, e name, e underscore designation, and e salary. So keep in mind that from the function chapter, the parameter name does not matter. What matters is the parameter type and the arrangement of the parameter type. So here it is integer, character, float. So according to that arrangement, okay, in the function definition also, the the first data type should be integer followed by character and float. It cannot start with float, okay, and then integer, character like that, okay. So the order of the data type arrangement should, that is what it matters, okay. So this is your normal function prototype declaration, or your normal function declaration, okay. So when you're declaring this function member functions inside the class definition, that means this body of these member functions must be outside of the class. So the only way to access them would be through the scope resolution operator, okay. So here, so again here, if you see that the two member functions input data, that means to enter the data and display the data, okay. So these are always used. Along with that, like in the previous inline member function program, okay, here also the return type is not void, but the return type is double. That means this calculate DA and then calculate HRA and calculate gross, it's returning a double value. It is returning a double value to the main function, okay. And in the case of calculate gross, the parameters that is passed is double, and the arguments that is accepted is uh, double data. Okay, so now if we come back to the main function, okay, if we come back to the main function, so just like the previous program, okay, the three variables da, hra, and gross, these three variables are declared here. Why are these three variables declared here? As I've explained in the previous program, okay, because the values, the the calling function, the calling function value is assigned to a variable, that is the your da, hra, and gross. So why is this assigned? Is because the cout statement is in the main function. The cout statement to display the dearness allowance, to display the house rent allowance and gross, is in the main function. Okay, so a variable is needed to display through the cout statement. So that's why these three variables da, hra, and gross variables are declared here. Why? Because the member functions, the function definition is returning the value back to the main function. Okay, so in that case, that's why the return type is double. Okay, and then we use the return function. Okay, so based on that, the class declares an object employee. Okay, so it creates the employee class object, and then uh, you in the user comment you can see that function object passes value to the input data class function. Okay, so this is how normally this is the initialization, right? This is the initialization. Okay, so what it does is, why is it initialization? Because this is the first time the value is assigned to the variable, but in this case you don't need to declare the variable name. Okay, like the e code, employee code, employee name here. Because why? Because the member function input data and the data members, okay, and the data members, these data members these data members are a part of the members of the class, and it belongs to the object, right? So directly the member function can access the data members and assign this value directly, so you don't need to declare the variable names. Okay, so that's why here directly you're assigning the values, the arguments, the actual arguments, okay, through the member functions of the object. Okay, so that's why object as function argument. Okay, so now what is happening is, okay, this is actually passing the value, so this is pass by value method. Okay, so uh, what is happening is, okay, this value, this 100 is this is your calling function, this value 100, okay, is passed from here to the calling function. This is your call function. So the calling function, this calling function, what is that? Yeah, this calling function input data calls this call function here. It is outside of the class definition. Okay, and since this call function is a part of the employee class, so to denote that, we have the scope resolution operator. Okay, so similarly, okay, here there must be a variable, okay, along with the data type mentioned, to accept the value that is passed from here to here. Okay, so that's why always in the function definition, okay, after the function name within the parenthesis, okay, the data type of the function, the data type of the variable, and the parameter name, that means your formal parameter, okay, will always be written. Why? Because this is where the variable is declared for the first time, and you know that a variable cannot store value unless it is been declared. So if you forget to write down here int and you just write e code, okay, that is an error. Okay, because that variable is not declared. Okay, so keep in mind that this is a local variable. This variable is local only for this particular function body. Okay, so it can be used only within this. So here the 100 is passed and accept and stored in here. Okay, in the same case, so in this case this is passed by value. Okay, And in the case of this Miss Sujata BCD computer and this salary value, okay, it is passed to e name, e designation, and e salary. So you can see that the in this case directly we're passing the argument, the value, integer, literals, okay, strings, okay, like that. But in the case of this we have the variable name, or in this case the formal parameters, right? So how do we know which data to send to the correct variable? So that's why the data type should match. This is integer, so that value is passed to this integer. So the serial arrangement of the data type should match. Okay, so that is very important from the calling function to the call function. Now after that, okay, now after that, keep in mind that emb code is a private data member, so object cannot access it directly. Okay, the object is able to pass this data only through the member function, because this is public. So it is passing this value to here, to this input data member function body, so that this member function body will execute, this will be executed. Okay, so after the value is passed, now what is happening is that in the function body it's written here employee code equals to e code. Okay, so now the value that is been assigned here, that is 100, gets transferred to this variable employee code. Okay, now you can see that here the normally in a function program, okay, if you are using this variable you have to declare the variable here, right? You have to declare the variable here, like int emp code character emb name, character emb designation, character float emb salary, right? Now that happens in a normal function program, but here using function, we using the concept of function, we are also using classes and object, that is object oriented features, right? So that's why, like I said, like I always keep on reminding, okay, the members, that is your data members and your member functions, okay, are part of the class definition. It belongs to the object, right? So since this value is the this value is stored, the 100 is stored in this variable. Okay, the member function can directly access the data, this data members. Okay, so that's why this value is directly passed to this emp code variable without writing down int emp code. You got it? Okay, so likewise, okay, e name is passed using the string manipulation function from s2 to s1, and then okay, e designation also from s2 to s1. Okay, so the value of s string 2 is passed on to the string 1, so that way the value gets transferred. Okay, similarly e salary to emb salary. Okay, now after that, the after the closing bracket, control comes back to the next line statement, that is here is the employees information. Okay, so this equal to symbol will be displayed, this one. Okay, after that the next statement is emb dot display, so whatever data has been entered has to be displayed, right? So this calling function will call this call function. Okay, display void. So all this cout statement will be displayed: emb code, emb name, emb designation, emb salary. Okay, now comes the complex one. Okay, after that what happens here, same like the previous one. Okay, da is equal to emb dot calculate da. Now this is your calling function. Okay, so since this is a calling function, the variable has been assigned. Why? Because this calling function calls this function, and then this, after executing this formula, okay, it returns a value back to the call function, to the calling function, and then that value has to be stored in this variable, because this variable, the cout statement is displayed here, is run here. Okay, so that's why for all these three calling functions the variable has been assigned, that is da, hra, and gross. Okay, now So normally this is your calling function. Okay, so using the object you are able to access this calculate DA member function. Okay, so but what happened is, okay, when this calling function calls this call function, okay, the compiler sees this keyword inline. Now it depends on the compiler whether to ignore this keyword inline or not. Okay, if the program length is too big, okay, or if there like I said, you just go through the uh, advantages and disadvantage, okay, from this online, okay, and then you will see. Okay, so if the program length is too large, okay, then in that case the compiler will ignore this inline keyword and execute this as a normal member function body. Okay, but in the case of this, uh, inline member functions is usually executed when the function body is quite small to be executed. Okay, inline member function cannot execute a large, complex compound statement function body. Okay, why is because uh, when this function is called and the compiler sees this keyword inline, and depending on the function body, okay, instead of the advantage of inline is, okay, when this calling function, okay, so the compiler passes, okay, compiler passes a notice to the from the calling function to the call function. Okay, the call function will accept the arguments and then pass the value here and then execute this function, this formula, and then again the it notifies the compiler that this value has to be returned back to from the call function to the calling function, like that, right? Okay, so again it notifies the main, so that value is passed, and then again it's that value is stored in variable D. So this creates an overhead. Okay, so stack overflow, or like because overhead in the hands like arguments. Okay, so why so this generates an overhead in terms of like time delay or like unwanted memory uh, space created, right? Because why is because like uh, in case of this, it is acceptable. So when the compiler sees this keyword inline, provided it is correct, okay, instead of all those procedures like I've said, okay, directly this statement return 1.20 into EMP seller. This function body statement, this one line statement, is directly copied and pasted here in place of this line statement. Okay, so what happened is that uh, when the compiler executes this line statement, okay, and it comes here, okay, provided the function body is quite small, okay, so this function body gets copied to here. So what happened is, okay, that reduces the overhead. That means the time delay taken to move from the calling function to the call function, execute the formula, return back, like that. Okay, so directly the memory location of this function body is accessed and stored. Okay, so that way it does not need to move to and fro. Now, like I said, inline function member function concept is only useful in such in where the function body to be executed is quite small. That is why in the class definition, okay, in the class definition, when there is a function definition to be when there's a function definition, okay, that means uh, a function body is defined in the class, okay, that is by default it's an inline member function. Okay, provided because within the class definition, okay, within the class definition, any function, any member function that is defined within the class definition will always be short. It will never be lengthy. Okay, always keep that in mind. Okay, so now same way, okay, so this function body also EMB salary regarding the HRA will be copied and pasted here. Same case for the gross also, that value will be copied and pasted here. Okay, so the outcome of that will be directly the cout can access that value and then display the values. Okay, so uh, so that is how you use these inline member functions, and most importantly, okay, how you use the object as function argument. Okay, so in here, so you see the main changes here is using the object is using the member functions to initialize the arguments, or to pass the arguments from the calling function to the call function, right? Now this is used, why? Because the data members are private. There is no way if the object can directly access like emb code equals to 100, right? String copy emb dot emb name comma miss Sujata. It's not possible. But what if suppose the data members are private? Okay, even if the data members are private also, yes, it can be passed direct, it can be passed directly, the data values can be passed directly using these member functions. Okay, instead of writing, even if the data members are public, okay, instead of writing down emb dot employee code, even if the object is directly able to access the data members, okay, this concept can also be used, pass by value method. Okay, which actually, okay, which actually uh, reduces space, okay, and also the complexity of the program. Okay, why? Because here the whole members of the object, or the whole data of the objects are directly passed. Okay, you can pass the whole data that belongs to the object through the member function. Okay, so that is the advantage of the object as function argument. Okay, so I hope that you have understood from this explanation, okay, what object as function argument is. Okay, now you can see that the program, yes, though it is lengthy, but yet it is simple. Okay, my suggestion is for those of you who are facing problem, okay, later on I'll come to the solve exercises regarding the class declaration. Okay, but for those of you who are facing a problem understanding this concept regarding the class definition, okay, uh, please, okay, you go through these solve exercises, okay, through these solve exercises, and from there, okay, this see, these programs are there, right? Define a class employee with the following specification: private members of. So here, this this came this year, your seniors, okay, for your seniors, okay. So every like now and then it used to come, okay. So this comes usually for 4 months or 5 months, like that. Okay, so here